Hello everyone and welcome to HUGO Econ. Today we're going to talk about positive and negative externalities through vaping and the flowers in my front yard, and we're going to graph it out and say what the government should do. Let's talk about the positive externality, the flowers in my front yard. So, my dad bought these flowers. Let's take a look. Wow, those are some pretty flowers. Thinking that, oh, these flowers are going to make our house look prettier. Great. That's the marginal private benefit, the satisfaction that my dad gets from buying the flowers that he did. However, our neighbors all around us, like these guys over here, who have dogs that pee in our yard all the time, they're like, wow, these flowers are beautiful and they make the entire neighborhood prettier. And that's the marginal social benefit, the benefit and satisfaction that the entire society gets from these flowers that my dad bought. And since the marginal social benefit is greater than the marginal private benefit, since the entire neighborhood is benefiting from the beauty of these flowers, since it makes the neighborhood prettier and thus the value of their houses increase, the society and our neighborhood wishes that producers would produce more of these flowers so that our neighborhood could be even more beautiful, and therefore are willing to pay a greater price. Now, let's look at what that looks like on a graph. Graph it out. As you can see in this graph, the marginal social benefit is greater than the marginal private benefit because, as I mentioned, the entire neighborhood, representing society, is benefiting from these flowers instead of just my dad, the marginal private benefit. So society wishes that these producers would produce where the marginal social benefit intersects the marginal private cost and are willing to pay more for these flowers. However, due to the market failure, the producers are currently producing at where marginal private benefit intersects marginal private cost. Now, let's discuss how the government can fix this market failure. To fix the market failure, the government should add a per unit subsidy to these flowers in order to provide an incentive to the producers to produce more and to produce at the level where the marginal social benefit intersects the marginal private cost. And as seen on this graph, by adding the subsidy, producers will receive a greater price and therefore their profit will increase while consumers will be paying less, fostering the consumers and the producers to produce and consume at a greater quantity. Now let's talk about our negative externality, vaping. This is a very pressing issue in our modern society due to an increasing amount of kids buying these vapes and inhaling mysterious ingredients into their lungs and getting addicted to bad things. So in this scenario, the marginal private cost is the price that vapes and all the other materials that go along with them go for on the private market. At this current output level, where the marginal private cost equals the marginal private benefit, the marginal social cost is much higher than the marginal private cost. Why? Because due to vaping being very bad for the lungs, because obviously inhaling these mysterious chemicals can't be good for you, there will be an increasing amount of deaths, an increasing amount of lung diseases, and it'll be up to society to fill these jobs abandoned by those who were the vaping victims. And it'll be up to society to pay for the healthcare and the increasing healthcare costs due to the increasing amount of diseases. And so, due to vaping being very bad for society as a whole, more than the individual, marginal social cost is much higher than marginal private cost, and therefore society wants I thought I was going to sneeze. The producers of vapes to produce at a greater cost and at a lower level of output, so that at a greater cost consumers are less likely to buy these vapes, and at a lower quantity less people will have access to them. Now, let's graph it out. As we can see, marginal social cost is much greater than marginal private cost at the current level of output, where marginal private cost intersects marginal private benefit. And therefore, society wants producers of the vaping industry to produce at a quantity of output where marginal social cost intersects marginal private benefit, and at a price also where marginal social cost intersects marginal private benefit. And therefore, we have ourselves a market failure. And how can the government solve this market failure? I will let you know looking at a supply and demand graph. As promised, here is the supply and demand graph. So, how can the government fix this market failure? Well, the government can add a per unit tax. What is this going to do? Well, as shown in the graph, adding a per unit tax is going to cause the supply curve to shift to the left. And what this is going to do, it's as shown in the graph, the price that producers get is going to be lower than the pre-tax market, and therefore the profit and the revenue that the vape producing industry is going to make is going to be much lower, and therefore they're going to have less incentive to produce at such a high level of output. And also seen in the graph, the price that consumers pay is going to be greater than the price that they paid in the pre-tax market, and therefore they will also be discouraged from buying at such a high level of output. And what this is going to do, it's going to produce where marginal social cost equals marginal private benefit, and therefore the market failure will be eliminated due to the government adding a tax on this industry.